Thanks very much, Alice. Really interesting to see this wider network of connecting research and publication. And there's a lot going through my mind at the moment about where and how to involve ourselves. I'd now like to introduce you to our next speaker, Adrian Stanley, who's the Managing Director of Digital Science and a past president of the Society for Scholarly Publishing. For many years, Adrian has spearheaded organizations at the cutting edge of publishing technologies with an international overview, including several years spent working in Beijing. Thanks, Adrian, and over to you.
Many thanks, Andrew, for the kind introduction and organizing this lovely online meeting. And thank you to Alice and Laura, too, for really setting up the session. Without the persistent identifiers and work that Crossref and ORCID and other organizations like that do, it will be very hard for digital science to build on and have the infrastructure to create innovative products. So my talk's going to focus a little more on alternative metrics and discoverability. Just to give you a little context, but this may come into more play for the question Q&A session later. Digital science is a portfolio of innovative companies. We invest, give startup grants, incubate companies. We currently have 12 companies in our portfolio, each with unique needs that many of them have been born out of research and academia, people trying to solve problems, and we bring a sort of central support and services. And work across all different stakeholders from funders, publishers, librarians, and institutions. Many of the products are also free for researchers to use, so we do like to be open. And our GRID database here, we've made openly available. That's the institutional registry that's part of the ROR registry that Alice mentioned in her talk. So we hope we play our part in the community too. But before we sort of go into altmetrics and metrics, I did want to sort of pose a question to you as the audience and where you're coming from of why do we use metrics? Librarians look at things in a very different way, from collection development and ways to publishers and editors, to funders, to researchers. But in essence, we're all trying to answer and gain a perspective on this deluge of content and information that's out there. So why I'm going to sort of show you altmetrics and alternative metrics there. But first of all, on the sort of discovery side, the current system or the previous system really relied purely on publications and citations of a measure of research impact and assessment. And I know there are many people and groups and initiatives, including DORA, that think this should be a lot broader and wider. Here at Digital Science, this is more of our view and landscape of the whole set of information and documents that really link to research outputs. So from very early stage grants, research ideas, to preprints and data sets, all the way through to tweets and blogs and attention, clinical trials, policy documents, and patents. We feel they all sort of have their place within the timeline and should be linked and connected as a way to both improve discoverability, but also look at the broader research output and work and attention that a research output gets in the whole context of the research ecosystem. Certainly you can see this is a sort of snapshot of our Dimensions database product that is free for researchers too, but you can see from a very early stage who's awarding funding and where. So if you're a researcher, looking at where grants are given and what sort of funding is given to certain disciplines is equally important to you as to where you publish. You often need to get grants and funding to start your research. But as you sort of go down the timeline, you can see the broader attention and knowing if an article was funded, did make clinical trials, did result in patents, or even was cited in policy documents, we feel is a very important part of the whole research ecosystem. So with that, the Dimensions product indexes all of the cross-ref DOIs, books, articles, monographs, preprints. So if you're in cross-ref and you have a persistent identifier, your content will be, at least as the base metadata, will be indexed in Dimensions, and then we find ways to enhance that metadata and link to grants, to data sets. We do also have programs where we index the full text that gives us even better linkage and connections. I'm going to sort of shift gears now a little bit to focus a little more on the alternative metrics, but really why they came about. I think, as everyone knows, the journal impact factor is a more traditional metric, and it has its role within sort of society as a way to police and curate journals and track the metrics and attention. But really, that takes a time to develop and evolve. And we also feel it's important that there's a societal impact of the work that's been mentioned, how people have talked more in public, how it's been translated, as we mentioned, the policy and patent citation. So these all form the basis of alternative metrics. So it's not one or the other, it's really a combination of metrics that we've seen emerge and evolve. As sort of noted there, really, alternative metrics are really immediate. As soon as somebody tweets or talks about your article, it can be showing up and linking to your publication, whereas obviously the citation metrics revolve around a certain sort of time period that can be anywhere from 2 to 5 years. So you get a very early indicators of what's happening with your research articles and outputs as they're being talked about, what are trending, and even seeing what the discussions are around them. So what are altmetrics as a sort of start, and why are they important? Well, really, altmetrics track attention going back to research outputs, and hence the note here about the persistent identifiers, DOIs. They track citations, but also tweets, social media, blogs, news, engagement from things like Faculty 1000. So there are a lot broader sort of coverage of where and when an article is being talked about in different venues. This, as you may perhaps be familiar, is the Altmetric donor. Altmetric is a company within digital science, but there is a broader initiative called Altmetrics. But the Altmetric donor collates all the different attention and uses algorithms to give it a score. So depending if it's a local news or an international news, a tweet or a retweet, a blog, a score is given as much so you can filter on that score. The score isn't everything, and we do encourage people to be responsible for metrics. It's really an indicator, but not the full story. If you look into the details, you get more context. So certainly encourage anybody who's thinking about altmetrics to think beyond the numbers. But here's a few sort of quick insights. This is from one of the South African Academy of Sciences journals, where one of their leading articles, you can see it's scored and ranked within context of the journal, similar age outputs, similar disciplines. And so you get a sort of sense of where an article is fitting in the ecosystem. That doesn't mean that is a better article than another article in a way. It's just getting a lot of attention, a lot of discussion that could be very relevant and topical at the time. Within the data from the breakdown of things like Twitter, you can see what people throughout the world are tweeting the article. Are they, the US, the United Kingdom, South Africa? Are they members of the public, scientists, science communicators? We're able to extract that from the Twitter profiles. So there's a lot more within the alternative metrics. It's very worth looking at and seeing the sort of impact and attention of your publications. This is a sort of another interesting kind of view of alternative metrics. Altmetrics collects the Mendeley saves, the bookmarks as readers save an article, their Mendeley accounts. Now, often the Mendeley, we don't count that in the altmetric score, but it's actually a very early indicator. There's been a number of research articles done on this for future citations. So this is the sort of metric it's worth following and noting if you're watching how your articles are being cited and used by others, but also just to know that this number of readers here, 238 for this article, have saved it to their library. They've wanted to keep that article. And here's the correlation if you see below the dimension citations that the Mendeley readers confirm to that. So that's certainly something I think it's worth looking at and discovering more and investigating more. Likewise, policy attention is tracked by Altmetric. We mine a number of policy sources, and we link back to the article. We actually have 23 different South African policy source organizations that sort of cite and reference academic works. And many times the author doesn't even realize that their work has been cited by a policy source. So it's a great way for them, the author, to sort of showcase how their work is being used to sort of affect and influence policy. And I just sort of leave you with this point here, that we do see, as you do sort of research and look at the attention of alternative metrics, there does seem to be a timeline that happens. An article typically will get a lot of attention early on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, and things like that. And then that progresses through timeline as it becomes talked about. More news stories and blogs pick it up. They understand the article. It's translated to a broader audience. But then with time, you get then the citation attention, the Wikipedia attention, the policy attention. So it's interesting to see where and when articles are talked about in context. And I think that's just something I wanted to show with you and share to get you thinking more broadly about the whole attention that your publications may be getting and the impact, not just looking at the score. A couple of South Africa specific facts here I put here. I took this from the Altmetric database that tracks over 30 million publications and data. So there's been a total of over 500,000 tweets from South Africa, with 43,700 specific unique tweeters based in South Africa. You may know more than me if that's a good or bad number, but you can see how that is in context. Some countries certainly use different venues, Facebook, other social media platforms, often in different regions, are more important or are more used ways to communicate. And on this left-hand side, I took this data from Dimensions, but over the last 3.5 years, there's been, with an author based at a South African institution, there's approximately sort of 27,000, 26,000 articles a year. You can see 2020 is also already trending well. Publications that are coming from a South African university and an author there. And then below here, you can see these are broken down to articles, which are sort of scientific journals, or chapters and proceedings and monographs in books, or preprints. So again, you get a sense of where researchers in South Africa are publishing. There are many, many more ways you can filter on this data. You can look at field of research categories, at UN Sustainable Development Goal categorization, to see where countries are publishing and where they have strengths, where they excel in certain areas. But for this talk, and I think I've probably reached my 10 minutes already, I leave it there. I look forward to talking more in the question and answers. I'm sure there's many things we can talk about. And again, thank you to all the other speakers and Andrew and the team for pulling this together. So, okay, thanks. Bye-bye.